Greetings and welcome back to our tutorial on the Generate Yearly Report project. We are now ready to embark on building our dispatcher bot for this project. Right up front, there's some great news. We're actually going to be able to completely repurpose our dispatcher bot that we developed when we completed the Generate Client Security Hash project. If you haven't already completed the dispatcher bot for the Generate Client Security Hash project yet, please take a moment to review and complete that project first before moving forward with the Generate Yearly Report project. There are actually 3, if not more, possibilities as we begin to embark on completing the dispatcher bot for the Generate Yearly Report project. The first, and the option that we're going to complete and implement for our training purposes, is to completely repurpose the entire dispatcher bot to identify, in this case, the WI4 records in an open status, as opposed to the WI5 records in an open status that we did when we developed the Generate Client Security Hash project. This is likely the least preferred option under normal circumstances, as this is going to create a complete duplication of developed logic or code between both dispatcher bots. However, from a training perspective, this is going to be acceptable since we've already developed the core of the logic for this processing need. In a more preferred approach, it would be more commonplace and acceptable to consider building a single dispatcher bot that could be used for both projects. If this project was being developed for a more real-to-life production type deployment or implementation, these next 2 concepts or ideas that I'm about to discuss would be the better option to implement, since we would not be implementing nearly identical developed solutions multiple times over again. The first approach would be to implement the single dispatcher bot, but with 2 separate queues available. One of the queues would receive all the WI5 records, while the other queue would receive all the WI4 records. From there, the performer bot that we developed for the Generate Client Security Hash would simply perform as it does today, simply go into the same queue that has the WI5 records loaded within. The performer bot that we are soon to develop for the Generate Yearly Report project would then go against the queue that contains all the WI4 records instead. So essentially, we would only have 3 automations: the single dispatcher bot going against the 2 queues, and 2 performer bots going against each of those separate queues respectively. The second approach would be to implement a single dispatcher bot and a single performer bot. This likely would be the most efficient, yet the more complex of all the potential ideas possible to handling this particular situation. The major change with this approach is that the dispatcher bot would have to be modified slightly to keep all records that are in either WI5 or in WI4 and open status as well, while adding these records to a single queue, and in this case to also include the work item type records as well. So we'd need to save both the WI5 and WI4 records alongside the current value that's already being saved, that being the WIID or the work item ID records. So this is to say that present day, the queue that we have added right now only contains the WIID record. We would also need to save the item type record being the WI5 or WI4. So both values would need to be saved in the orchestrator queue. So one major change there. But having the work item type information contained in the orchestrator queue, more specifically, if you think performer bot, the transaction item record within the performer bot, would create the need for the performer bot to first analyze what type of record is being processed before conducting any action on the record. That said, that if the record type coming back from the orchestrator queue is of type WI5, then the logic we previously developed for the performer bot for the Generate Client Security Hash would need to be executed. Inside of, however, that same performer bot, so this concept of having just one performer bot, the new logic would then need to be developed to handle the scenario for all the WI4 records that are found in the single orchestrator queue. This is the same exact logic that we're going to develop, but again, rather being inside of its own individual automation. There could potentially be even more options that I have not thought of or even considered in this conversation here. That's to say that anytime we're working on building an automation, there's almost always multiple different ways of solving or accomplishing the same task or goal at hand. With that said, let's go ahead and begin repurposing our dispatcher bot that we developed for the Generate Client Security Hash project. So inside of Studio, I'm first going to navigate to the parent folder that contains the dispatcher bot for the Generate Client Security Hash project and simply make a copy of it. So what I want to do here inside of Studio, I want to hit the open button up top here. I am now going to make sure that I am in my same parent folder here. So my documents, the UiPath. Here is my dispatcher bot for my HashBot project right here. So what I want to do is simply do a Control-C and a Control-V right here. I'm making an identical copy of this folder. So you notice now it shows up as copy. What I want to do here is get rid of the copy, but then get rid of HashBot and simply say generate yearly report. That's going to become my new project name. Generate yearly report dash dispatcher. So again, this is going to be my dispatcher bot for this project. Then I'm simply going to click off of it. And now, mind you, I'm in the open here from Studio. I want to go into the Generate Yearly Report Dispatcher, which again, right now is an identical copy of our HashBot one. So go into the project.json file here. Go ahead and get this project to load. We're going to do a couple little cleanup things here to make it a bit more more specific, I should say, to our Generate Yearly Report project. So first things first, what I want to do, notice it says HashBot Dispatcher up here, although we renamed the parent folder. So we need to make sure we rename our project here. I'm going to do a right click, and from here, say Project Settings. This is where I can rename the project here, Generate Yearly Report. In this case, this is going to be our dispatcher bot for the Generate Yearly Report project. In this case, our description also needs to change. It's now no longer WI5. It's going to be WI4 records that are in open status, and subsequently load those records into the queue, so the work item ID in this particular case. So simply click OK. When you do that, you'll notice Generate Yearly Report Dispatcher is here. Also updates in our title at the very top. At this rate, if I open up the main workflow, everything's exact to what we saw in the Generate Client Security Hash. So the only change that is needed for this particular automation, I'm actually going to go right into the System1 folder here. And where we have load work item into queue, I'm going to open up this XAML file. The only change that we need to make is directly inside of our filtered data table here. If I open up the filter, instead of WI5, I need to change this value to WI4. So again, if you recall, it runs through, it does the extract work items logic. So if you remember this, you don't have to necessarily pull this file up, but just from a demonstration point of view, recall we have it go through all of the work item records, all the tables, all the pages, extracting all the record types out. We subsequently load all this data into the output data table here that we send back in, and subsequently then process through this filter here. So before it was WI5, with the Generate Yearly Report being WI4, that's the only value we need to change. the "and" status being open, so it will make sure that all those WI4 records are in open status just like we had before. At that rate, you can go ahead and save this file here. Obviously, I told you you didn't have to open this one up, but we can close that down. You should already have a orchestrator queue built. I'm going to go ahead and log really quick back in just so we can see it, cloud.uipath.com. Get myself logged back in here. Make sure my queue is there. See, I'm already logged in. So if you need to log in, go ahead and get yourself logged into the website here. Then go into your orchestrator services. You should have in our queues, get this guy to load here. And here we go. So going into my queues, you should already have a queue in here called Acme 1 from our previous conversations. Recall before we stepped into this particular conversation, I went ahead and deleted and add a clean queue here. If you don't have a clean queue, go ahead and copy your queue name here to your clipboard, delete, and re-add the queue so you get yourself a nice clean queue. Another thing to maybe quickly take a look at is going into the data folder back in Studio. Open up your config really quick. Just make sure that everything is still set from your previous project. Again, simply leveraging even the same queue name that we had before. So there's the Acme 1, and then our path to the work items, as well as the Acme 1 login. Good little reminder there to make sure you have your credentials still here in assets. And again, Acme 1 login. This should have the username and password for the Acme System 1 web page. Looks like everything on my end is good. The config's got everything that I need, the right queue name, the right credential name. And again, this being repurposed from our previous dispatcher bot. Go ahead and close the config. Obviously, you can't run your project with the config file open. Otherwise, you get the wonderful error saying that it's already in use, and you got to close it and restart your project. So at this point, I'm actually ready to attempt to run our new dispatcher bot for the WI4 record. So on main, I'm going to go ahead and hit the debug project here. We should see Internet Explorer close and reopen. Recall we had the kill process task in there. It should cause IE to close. There goes IE, it just disappeared. Now it should be opening up. Looking at the log messages there on the output window, IE has come up. And it should log itself in. If you need to hit log out here because you're already logged in, make sure you do that. In my case, it was already logged out. There's the home page. Now it's taking us to work items, so it should traverse through just like we did before with our previous dispatcher bot. It should navigate its way through the various pages. And notice here, I still have all my WI5 and completed status records. That's fine because at the very end of our process, it's now only going to filter out the WI4 records that are in open status. So at this point, I have not reset any of my test data from my previous run. Before we complete our generate yearly report project, we will reset the test data as we did when we were working on the generate client security hash. So hold on to that thought. We will obviously test some of the data that we already have here as we go to build our performer bot for the generate yearly reports. So we'll obviously have a clean set of data before we attempt to upload the project. So again, this little spot here, as we saw before, it's going to have a bit of a delay as it's processing all the data through to completion here. And then obviously subsequently building our data table internal to the automation. Once it's done, we should see it log out here and close IE. In our output window, we should see how many records there are successfully added to our orchestrator queue. So the automation is done. Everything appears to have run successful. So right here's what I was going after. Total records after the filter, it says there's 15 WI4 records in an open status, an easy way to verify or validate this. I'm going to go back into Internet Explorer manually now. Get it pulled up here. Kind of two checks that I want to do here just to make sure that our dispatcher bot is indeed behaving the way that I would expect. So I'm going to go to the cloud for one. Let's see what the queue actually has. It should have the 15 records loaded now. Get this guy re-signed in here. Back to Orchestrator. While that's doing that, I'm going to bounce into a new tab here. And in our new tab here, I want to pull up the Acme page. Kind of do a little cheating here, but pull up the Acme web page. Log myself back in here. Looks like I lost it here. Here, copy. Try to open it in a new tab. Go back to the cloud page. Here we go. Got the login screen on this side. Let me go ahead and get logged in. Logged in there. Oh, I just reloaded it and just came back. Where I wanted to go here, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth. I know on the Acme System 1 page, under User Options, Check Training Assignments, what I want to validate here is indeed I have 15 items. So this is good. On the second line here, Generate Yearly Report, it says I should have 15 items. Again, what I saw inside of Studio, I've got 15 items here. So I know this is correct. The final thing that I want to validate is back in IE, inside my queue, just to ensure that all 15 items indeed have made it. So here we go, Acme, and there are the 15 items. So I could go in and begin spot checking just to see if all the records are correct. I'm going to hedge a bet here that everything is in good order. So with that said, we have officially completed the work that's needed to generate our dispatcher bots, simply doing a repurposing of our generate client security hash dispatcher bot. Again, there are obviously multiple ways and probably way more preferred ways of doing what we just did, but from a reusability, more focused from a training perspective only, to save ourselves the development effort of all these XAML files here. We simply modified our old dispatcher bot to meet the new requirement needs for this project, which will then subsequently allow us to focus the majority of our time building the logic that's needed for our Performer bot, which, by the way, is coming up next.